Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and welcome to Patriot Radio, broadcasting live from deep inside the heart of the future Liberty State. Sponsored once again by On Fire Ministries, in the legacy of Dr. Stan Monteith, bringing you the story behind the story and the news behind the news, where it's not about right or left, it's about right and wrong. It's about our hope not being in man, but in Jesus Christ. About not ending in prayer, but moving to action. Your kingdom come, your will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Father, deliver us from the evil one.
Welcome to Patriot Radio.
Good afternoon, fellow patriots. This is Matt Shea, and today on Patriot Radio, BronyCon. And what does it have to do with the North Idaho shooter? Also, our guest today, Selwyn Duke, to talk about the moral decline in America and what we should all know about this. Because going forward and coming from, at least when I grew up, and I hate to even say that, things have taken a dark turn in this country, and we can see Satanism almost everywhere. And what can we do about it as Americans? And I've got some good news for all of you out there in Patriot Radio land. And we'll get to that here in just a second. So during this time when darkness covers the land, light must shine brighter. And to do that, we need to be praying. So if you would like to join us in prayer, patriotradio.us/prayer, and make sure that you follow us for all of the prayer points that you would need at patriotradio.us/telegram, where we give you breaking news and real-time intelligence analysis. Some of the best, actually, in the country. We're proud to do this. The entire production team here at Patriot Radio. We try to find stuff before everyone else, get you in the know about the things that the news really isn't covering and the story behind the story. So, for all of you out there, I'm going to go to the scripture first, and that is your wisdom from the Word. And coming to us from Romans chapter 1. And as we talk about Romans, understand this is kind of one of those verses that you should memorize or at least know where it is. Romans chapter 1, verse 28. And just as they did not see fit to acknowledge God, and we're seeing that in our country right now, God gave them up to a depraved mind to do those things that are not proper, people having been filled with all unrighteousness, wickedness, greed, and evil, full of envy, murder, strife, deceit, and malice. They are gossips, slanderers, haters of God, insolent, arrogant, boastful, inventors of evil, disobedient to parents, without understanding, untrustworthy, unfeeling, and unmerciful. And although they know the ordinance of God, in other ways, they know the right thing to do, that those who practice such things are worthy of death, that they not only do the same, but also approve of those who practice them. This is a cautionary tale to the church that we should never compromise and say that perversion is okay. We should always approach people in love. We always should. It doesn't mean we don't tell them the truth. And in most cases I've seen, at least evangelizing and doing street evangelism for years, people respond to the truth because they already know what they're doing is wrong. They just don't know the way out. They want a community that will surround them, especially where they're at, and help them walk into a path of healing and freedom and a path of salvation. So, as we talk about some of the issues today that are going to be a little bit disturbing, remember that, yes, it is wrong, morally wrong, but really the question is, what is God calling us to do about it? And that brings us now to your daily intelligence brief. Coming to us from the globalist front. Yeah, the globalist front.
The future is built by us. We have the means to make progress on the global agenda.
The digital Leviathan is launching. When? This Independence Day. Now, remember I talked last episode about timing, and everything is about timing. Their original plan was to try to bring the United States down 1976 on the 200th anniversary. Then it didn't work, so they went for the 225th anniversary in 2001. That didn't work, and now they're trying to do it on the 250th anniversary in 2026. And so you're going to see this ramp up over the next year as they try to achieve their goals. They will fail, but you need to know the timing, and you need to know that we can't back down on spreading the truth to our friends and family members so they're not caught off guard. In just a few days, AI.gov, a centralized artificial intelligence command center that represents nothing less than a digitalization of tyranny. Not hyperbole or conspiracy theory. This is documented fact. Leaked from government repositories and confirmed by multiple sources. A blueprint for algorithmic authoritarianism. An AI chatbot assistant, unified API framework, and a panopticon dashboard. What is that? Well, a comprehensive workplace surveillance disguised as management analytics. There's more in this article. Take a look at it at Technocracy News, but this is the whole intent behind removing government bureaucrats, which I've advocated for years, but they want to replace it by AI. And it's not going to be limited to government bureaucrats. It's coming possibly to your job as well. So get familiar with this stuff. This article right here, we're going to be actually doing a show on later because I think everybody needs to know that this is coming in the next year. Robots deploying next year, 50,000 in the first year. Looking at 250,000 the following year and 150 million by 2030. Also interesting, Peter Thiel, a homosexual transhumanist, talks about the Antichrist and transhumanism. And here are some of his not so pleasant comments. I would like us to radically solve these problems. What are these problems? Life extension, body innovation. The ideal was this radical transformation where your human natural body gets transformed into an immortal body, quote unquote. In other words, doing what God said only He can do, and that is glorify the human body and make it immortal through resurrection and the blood of Jesus Christ. Then he says this: we want more than cross-dressing or changing your sex organs. We want you to be able to change your heart and change your mind and change your whole body. Then he says this. Interesting, he brought this up at the same interview. He brings up the Antichrist. And here's what he says. The way the Antichrist would take over the world is you talk about Armageddon nonstop. You talk about existential risk nonstop, and this is what you need to regulate. We need to regulate speech about Armageddon. Understand what he's talking about. He's talking about coming directly after Christians. This is a direct attack at Christianity. And he's trying to say that Antichrist really isn't a boogeyman. It's just people talking about what's the existential risk of certain things getting out of hand. Like, I don't know, AI. Fascinating. I could talk about it for a long time. I think there's always a question of how to articulate some of these existential risks and challenges we have. And they're all framed in this sort of runaway dystopian science text. In other words, he's just saying that Christians talking about Armageddon, well, that's not real. We're just trying to process existential risks. So we don't have to worry about the Antichrist. And yet he's the one that's advocating for people having immortal bodies and changing our minds, changing our bodies, something only God can do. That literally, when you hear people talk about this, that literally is the spirit of Antichrist that we're hearing right now in our time. Again, everybody needs to check that article out, Technocracy News. Pat Wood doing a fantastic job. We're going to get him on here on the show here soon. Trump administration demands the UN dismiss Palestinian rights envoy Francesca Albanese, citing her virulent anti-Semitism and open support for terrorism. Well, That's not really the issue. The issue is you have these people embedded in the United Nations who have openly supported terrorism. Why is the United States still in the United Nations, and why is the United Nations still inside the United States? I think both of those things need to be stopped. We need to get out of the United Nations, and we need to get the United Nations out of the United States. That brings us now to the China front. Power struggle in Beijing. Major Xi Jinping ally purged from China's top military body, according to Rod D. Martin. Miao Hua, I'm not making that up, one of Xi's most trusted allies, has been formally purged from China's top command. Well, this is an admiral. So we've seen in the military and intelligence space, the army and intelligence space, this continuing purge. Multiple Xi allies have vanished in recent months. Defense Minister Li Zhangfu, the CMC Vice Chair, General He Weidong, and Navy Chief of Staff Li Hanjun stripped of his title. So you have multiple purges, multiple strippings of title, and Xi has been very absent from the public eye, especially in the last 4 weeks, giving rise to a huge power struggle. And I think it's absolutely true, especially since China's economy was threatened, and their economic ability to wage war was threatened by tariffs from President Trump, and their ability to fuel war threatened by the whole conflict in Iran. We're going to keep our eyes on this. I have a feeling more is going to come out here in the next 2 weeks. China's nuclear force buildup, a direct challenge to U.S. superiority. China's nuclear force expansion has fundamentally transformed the global strategic environment, according to senior congressional leaders who characterized Beijing's modernization program as a shift from limited deterrence capabilities to comprehensive nuclear forces designed for strategic competition with the United States. By 2035, China aims to possess the world's most powerful nuclear arsenal, surpassing that of the United States of America. So that raises the question, are we going to actually modernize our nuclear forces in this new tripolar environment with the US, China, and Russia? So I think that needs to be something taken up by Congress very soon. And the renewal of Star Wars can now be understood in this context of what President Trump is doing. Also, Trent Telenko bringing up some great analysis on the combat implications for Taiwan and a new Chinese commercial drone coming to us. And, you know, DJI, a lot of people don't know, is Chinese. Very clearly that some of DJI's transmissions actually may be going back to China. They've now very clearly introduced a heavy coaxial quadcopter with 80 kilogram lift capacity, about 60 pounds, something like that. So obviously the Chinese moving forward under the guise of commercial drones to try to compete with drone warfare and get ahead of the curve, actually. This type of a quadcopter could drop very big ordnance, in other words, large bombs, as part of an invasion force without endangering Chinese personnel. That's why this is happening. Also, America, if we wanted to, could supply 85% of the world's rare earth minerals. Currently, China is doing it. The United States used to. And the reason? Well, out of control environmentalists and environmentalist movements have stifled innovation in the United States, and Trump is reversing this. And the reason to reverse this is very obvious. Rare earth minerals power the modern world: fighter jets, smartphones, missiles, satellites, electric cars, wind turbines, lasers, and magnets. 70% of ours come from China. That is a strategic and significant problem for the United States that we need to reverse, and a very big weak point for us. So, Rod D. Martin, great analysis there, that The United States needs to begin to reverse that. I also, and as you've heard me say on the show, part of the reason I think they're going to do this and do it in earnest is because our oil and rare mineral wealth can also translate into a universal basic income. I do not support that. Universal basic income for Americans who have been displaced by AI and robotics. You see how this all kind of comes together. Also, FBI Director Kash Patel just announced the arrest of 2 Chinese nationals accused of spying and trying to recruit U.S. military personnel to work for the Chinese government. I think we're going to again see more of this coming soon. We'll come back from the break, more from the Middle East front. And what is this whole deal about BronyCon?
What if I told you you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back with the Middle East front. Well, Trump was down at Alligator Alcatraz today for a tour. By the way, Alligator Alcatraz, fantastic. 3,000 bed facility built in a week. And they could have done it in 3 days if there wasn't some regulatory hurdles to get over. This is what I'm talking about for America. All right, but back to the Middle East front. A reporter asked President Trump, how firm are you on Netanyahu ending the war in Gaza? Trump asked, very firm. He wants to end it too. I think we'll have a deal next week. Meanwhile, the IDF's 98th Division has now entered Gaza. This is an elite multi-brigade paratrooper and commando unit trained for rapid deep strike missions behind enemy lines with a sharp focus on urban warfare and precision raids. So it looks like they may be going for the final 1-2 death punches there in Gaza to finally take it over completely. I suspect that this deal that's going to be reached next week will be an expansion, as we've detailed on the show about the Abraham Accords, including other Middle East countries coming to a peace agreement. Wonder if it'll be for 7 years. Also, President Trump down at Alligator Alcatraz says, we'll get whatever we want from Iran. I think we'll have a deal next week. Again, everything seems to be hinging on this coming together in the next week. Meanwhile, multiple explosions heard and smoke seen rising from a site to the southeast of the Iranian capital of Tehran, reportedly at or near a military base. Well, that military base looks like a Revolutionary Guards headquarters, and the strike did occur at that headquarters. Also, reports coming in of a second explosion in Tehran near a weapons and missile warehouse in Banafse Park in Tehran. So we're seeing continued strikes from inside the country, not a violation of the ceasefire agreement, but clearly some sort of covert operations going on there. Obviously, nobody knows if it's Mossad or nobody knows if it's some sort of uprising beginning with the people of Iran. However, the cyber warfare, and we need to pay attention to this stuff, is still going on between Israel, Iran, the United States, everybody in earnest. Iran's digital army exposed 240,000 bot posts tried to derail Trump's strike. Groundbreaking research commissioned by Israel's Ministry of Diaspora Affairs and Combating Anti-Semitism reveals that Iran deployed a sophisticated bot network to undermine American public support for military action against its nuclear facilities. And this is a cautionary tale for all of us. I had actually, when I posted some things regarding what was happening up here in North Idaho and this horrendous tragedy, bots started to comment against what I was posting. And I'm like, this is very clearly a bot. I mean, look at the address, look at the fact that there's no location, no user profile really. It's clearly a bot. So be very careful listening to these comments. The Marxists are way smaller than they seem. The jihadis are way smaller than they seem, and they've got to amplify their presence using these types of bots. So this is fifth generation warfare real time that we're seeing. The regime in Iran instigates terror on British soil and uses a network of fake charity schools and religious institutions to promote extremism. And it uses those things to hold my country hostage, according to Nigel Farage. He is meeting with Reza Pahlavi today, and he's been meeting with leaders in the United Kingdom in earnest here over the last 72 hours. Again, expect something to come next week, and expect this crown prince to be directly in the center and a part of it. J. Michael Waller, an optimistic vision for a future Iran. Once the mullahs are gone, Iran has a sophisticated and highly educated population at home and worldwide based on a very ancient civilization. And the Shah of Iran, or the Crown Prince, just published an AI video with highlights of what Iran could look like. The mullahs are gone. Again, all of this signifying a narrative-shaping operation, a regime change in Iran, regardless of what the mainstream media is saying. Watch for it in the next 2 weeks. Danish citizen was arrested for spying on Jewish targets in Berlin on behalf of Iranian intelligence. German federal prosecutors have announced the arrest of Ali S., accused of spying for Iranian intelligence. He was arrested in Denmark and expected to be extradited to Germany. Again, this Islamic infiltration in Europe. They're not anywhere near getting a handle on it, but at least they're doing something right now. Kazakhstan, understanding the signs of the times, has officially banned burqas and niqabs from being allowed in public, calling face coverings a, quote, threat to national security. It's better to wear our national dress than the black robes. The countries are beginning to see the issue with jihad and take away the signs and vestiges of it. On Monday, U.S. President Donald J. Trump signed an executive order ending nearly all sanctions placed on Syria since 2004. I do not believe this is a good idea, and I understand this is probably part of a larger agreement, again, coming out next week. We need to understand the nature of Islam. They will do treaties for 10 years because that's what Muhammad did. And those 10 years gives them enough time to build back their forces so that they can launch jihad again. Let's not be naive about this. And I hope that there are some people speaking about that in President Trump's ear. The Muslim Brotherhood has been banned and is a designated terrorist organization in Egypt, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, Bahrain, and now Syria, interestingly enough. Why is it still legal in the United States and the United Kingdom? A great question. Congress needs to ban the Muslim Brotherhood and declare it what it is, a foreign terrorist organization, and do it quickly. That brings us to the Russia front. Ukraine's SBU just arrested a 16-year-old man for allegedly spying for Russia. Pictures, GPS coordinates on his phone, lured by quick cash. Not necessarily pro-Russian sentiment, but it was recruited online. We're going to see more of this as well as intelligence services do profiling. They have the same marketing and same digital selves database. So they have, let's say, 5,000 data points on every single human being. They can begin targeting you. Look at what your motivations are: money, ideology. Maybe it's coercion or ego, or maybe it's revenge. They can look at those things and then introduce stimulus online through chat rooms or direct messages to get people to act a certain way and then recruit them for intelligence services. Be careful who you're talking to online. You never know who it might be. Also, Ukraine has struck several Russian air defense radar systems protecting the Crimean Bridge. Seems to indicate there might be an attack here in the next 24 hours on that bridge. Radar systems that serve S-300 and S-400 launchers located near the bridge were struck. So probably safe to say that something is going to happen to cut off Crimea. Also, hilariously, and I want to show this just to show the information war that we're in right now. An entire country looks like it's been submerged in molten lava as a result of normal summer temperatures. This is a way that they try to psychologically get you to buy into the narrative of climate change. Even though these temperatures are normal, it looks like the entire country of Germany is under a volcano right now. That brings us to the national front. Jerome Powell saying, in the wake of President Trump vetting candidates to replace him, the U.S. Federal Reserve must be, quote, completely non-political, end quote. Only it's not and never has been. There is a politics behind it, and it's the politics of globalism. Which brings us to a hidden camera capturing a principal economist at the Federal Reserve admitting that Jerome Powell's legacy is, quote, somebody who held the line against Trump, end quote, and obviously deliberately hurting the U.S. economy. Ariel Hismo was caught, looks like, with James O'Keefe again, and he said, shh, don't tell anyone. I'm really worried that I'm saying stuff that's classified. It's all classified, end quote. With these kind of statements, not only should Powell be removed, there may need to be a trial that he was operating not in the best interests of the United States, but a global cabal. By the way, we don't need to replace the Federal Reserve. We already have a system for that. Founding fathers fought this. Andrew Jackson fought this. Even Abraham Lincoln. And now it's our generation's turn to get rid of any attempts at a Federal Reserve. We need to ban it for good. Which brings us to some good news stories. Pete Hegseth has started a prayer group at the Department of Defense, and some of the Marxists are apoplectic about it, but unashamedly. He talks about Jesus Christ, and he thanks God for all God has done for the United States of America. Shifting gears a little bit, a reminder that terrorism has occurred in the United States. Jihadis and communists continuing a reign of terror here in the U.S., and we can only hope that the FBI is disrupting those networks and dismantling, and I hope we see something soon. But an 82-year-old Jewish American woman, Karen Diamond, has died from her wounds sustained when the illegal migrant Mohammed Solomon threw petrol bombs at a group of Jews marching in Colorado in support of the hostages. We can't ever let this stuff fall away. We pray and speak comfort over her family right now in the name of Jesus. Independence Day is coming up on Friday. So Ilhan Omar, of course, puts up the flag of Somalia and celebrates Somalian independence. And if you scroll down just a little bit on this, one of the comments brings up a good point. And if we could bring that back up and show this picture, how weird is it that Minnesota's state flag looks similar to the flag of Somalia? Maybe we should investigate all of this further. Also, an Iranian national and his wife were federally indicted after she allegedly threatened to shoot ICE officers in Arizona. Again, over the summer, we're going to see more of this exposed and dealt with. Which brings us to something we're going to talk about with our guest today, Selwyn Duke, and that is Zoran Mamdani. President Trump threatened him with arrest if he refuses to comply with ICE. Quote, we don't need a communist in America, end quote. So President Trump obviously has him on his radar screen. Also in a slightly humorous, but I think Trump was absolutely serious, bit of news here. He's mulling over putting crocodiles in Texas's Rio Grande River to stop illegal border crossings. Quote, a lot of people think we should do it, frankly, end quote. The big, beautiful bill has passed, despite the reservations of about some of the provisions of many, including Elon Musk. It followed a 51-50 vote after 25 hours of debate. J.D. Vance was the tiebreaker. Some more good news as Secretary Kennedy continues to make America healthy again. Smuckers will be removing synthetic dyes from their products by the end of 2027. And he is urging other companies to follow their lead. Also today, Hershey is going to remove synthetic dyes from its snacks by the end of 2027 as well. By the way, all of that implies that's how much they have on shelves and in warehouses right now. 2 years. President Trump just asked the Department of Justice to look into arresting Alejandro Mayorkas for aiding and abetting an invasion of our country. Biden never pardoned Mayorkas, so he is still fair game. Wow. Maybe it's finally beginning. Accountability. I know a lot of us have a fatigue right now. We've really not seen anything happen of substance. And after the break, we're going to continue briefly on the national front as we talk about what happened in North Idaho and the connection to bronies. What on earth is that? When we come back from the break.
What if I told you you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
And we're back with a continued national front, but it's really a regional front right now. This whole shooting up there in North Idaho on Canfield Mountain, horrendous. But Idaho Tribune, doing a fantastic job of investigating, has released new photos and videos of this Coeur d'Alene firefighter shooting suspect, Wes Rowley, and his TikTok account. According to these screenshots, Rowley was allegedly a brony. We're going to dive into what that is here in a second, but it's allegedly a boy interested in My Little Pony, and he used the hashtag, quote, furry, end quote. In addition to that, there was a picture of him wearing a t-shirt that looks like it has satanic symbols on it that may be related to the 786 cult and maybe others. So there's some more investigation that needs to happen. These symbols are very key. He also bizarrely claimed to sell organs on the black market. Very, very weird. So what is a brony? Well, here's a picture of one. Adult male fans of My Little Pony. Guys, you can't make this stuff up. I didn't even really know what a brony was until we started doing some research into this stuff. Here's another picture. And I'm going to warn you, this is disturbing even for our research staff and for adult viewers. Here's one wearing hooves as a unicorn dressed up in spandex tights. And before, again, we're stalling just a little bit. If you're sensitive to this kind of stuff and it gets you kind of horrified, just wait a second. Maybe turn away from the TV screen, but here you go. Here is a man dressed as a unicorn in spandex tights, an example of a brony. And that is the unfortunate last part of the briefing. Antidote to dependency and socialism is to be a God-fearing, self-reliant, freedom-loving American. Thank you to everybody that's been praying for us on the show. And now we're going to go to our guest, Selwyn Duke. He is a writer for The New American and one of the great writers of today regarding the moral decline in America, but more importantly, what we should be doing about it. Selwyn Duke, I'm sure you just saw that about bronies. What's your initial reaction?
Yeah, well, this is part and parcel of the moral decay, Matt. And by the way, thank you for having me on again, that we've been experiencing for a very, very long time. I mean, we just see this explosion in perversion and all sorts of anomalous behavior simply because we're tolerating these things. And that's something I've pointed out, that if you tolerate the intolerable, well, you get more of it, right?
Right, you get more of it. And I think some people they can't believe that bronies are real. So we're going to dive into this just a brief moment. There's actually a brony con. We'll go ahead and roll the video.
This is BronyCon. And yes, you're looking at grown men dressed up like magical horses. but this is one of the few places on Earth where that is socially acceptable.
Like, we're here, we're dressed up, I mean, we look like idiots, but nobody cares. Everybody receives it very well. It's just a good time.
I'm 25.
22. 23.
As an outsider, it all seems a little unsettling.
People get put off by the idea of, like, older men watching a show intended for little girls. They somehow think that's creepy.
You know, a lot of people think of us as, perverts, people like that,
All of us are 30-year-old guys living in our parents' basements.
No job, they just sit and watch the show.
Go up to people, tap them on the shoulder and say, "Do you want to be my friend?"
We had to play it so people would believe it. Again, So and Duke, they're even in their own words, they're admitting that this is morally wrong. How do we combat something like this?
Yeah, well, you and I have talked about this in the past. I mean, the first thing we have to do is we have to resurrect virtue in our society, which is something that our founding fathers talked about quite a bit, actually. And first, we have to understand what it is. Virtue refers to that set of objectively good moral habits, and the virtues started being defined thousands of years ago by people such as Aristotle, and of course, it developed from there, and there are so many of them: charity, chastity, diligence, faith, love. It just goes right up the list. Courage. And once you understand this, life becomes a lot simpler because you understand, okay, well, I have a child. How do I mold him into a good person? Well, it's just as if I wanted to teach him tennis, I would learn the principles of tennis and inculcate them. The same thing here. You learn the principles of morality, namely the virtues, and you inculcate them. And this is important, Matt, because, I like to quote here famed late architect Buckminster Fuller. He said, if you want to change things, you don't just attack the existing order. You develop a new model that makes the old model obsolete. Here, the old model is this liberalism, this leftism that has permeated our society, and the so-called new model is really just an eternal model: truth, faith, God, and of course, the virtues.
I don't think that this is a coincidence we're talking about this today. Over the last 2 weeks, there has been a lot of arrests, incidents inside the United States, ambush-type incidents in 2 other states, Santa Monica, also in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Then you have someone that has been arrested for threatening Christian churches inside the United States. I mean, really, all of this ultimately is aimed at Christianity. Peter Thiel coming out and really saying that we need to regulate the discussion that is between Armageddon or the Antichrist and whatever else is out there, and that this really is just fear-mongering. This is a way to shape narratives, and we need to regulate that speech. I mean, this all is aimed at Christianity, Selwyn Duke. How is the church going to, and what should the church be doing right now in this type of environment? Because I think a lot of people, they're saying, it's not going to happen. It's just people talking. What do we have to worry about?
Yeah. Well, first of all, I just read a story, and I don't believe it's a false story, that there was a pastor who was crucified in his bed in Arizona by someone who was anti-Christian. And this man, who now has been caught, also, they say, had a hit list. He wanted to target other pastors in the same way. And when I say this man was crucified in his bed, it was with a crown of thorns, the whole 9 yards. So you're talking about something that was very, quote, newsworthy, but which the mainstream media buried, of course, not surprisingly. But yeah, what the church needs to do is it needs to start professing truth. If you want to be a good physician, you've got to make the right diagnosis, then prescribe the correct cure. And if you go into too many churches today, what you hear is either leftism in certain extreme cases or too many cases, or you just hear anodyne nonsense, about love. And love is fine. We all agree with love. The problem is that none of the pastors I'm talking about, or clergymen, I should say, are defining what constitutes loving behavior. What are we talking about? Are we talking about taking a sexually confused kid and encouraging him to, quote, transition? Or are we talking about encouraging him to embrace the identity that God has given him? What are we talking about? You have to be precise. And like I said, you have to make the right diagnosis. The problem we have in our society is not that we don't have enough so-called liberalism. The problem is that we have too much tolerance. Tolerance, by the way, implies the abiding of a negative. We have too much evil that is rampant in our society, and you need to speak out against that, arm people against it, and like I said, emphasize the virtues so people will understand what the cure is. Too many clergymen, Matt, are behaving like politicians. It's as if they're afraid to offend. No,
Right.
You can't be a politician. You've got to be a warrior of God.
You have to be a warrior of God. And we look at simple things. Marxism, rooted in Satanism. You can go read Karl Marx's poetry. He has an entire book on poetry, very satanic wording in there, no question about it. And I think the next generation is looking for that kind of authenticity and that kind of truth today.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, listen, I got this from a clergyman who is a pretty reputable source, and he said that Vladimir Lenin once was asked, I guess rhetorically, his comrades what the real enemy of the revolution was, the communist revolution, and they didn't have the answer, and he gave it, according to him, it was, quote, the Holy Spirit of God. And of course, this is why you see despotic movements always attacking Christianity. The Soviet Union did that. It tried to attack the church and destroy it, did attack the church. And the Nazis did it too. A lot of people don't understand that. There actually was this woman, her last name was Mandel. She is Jewish. Anyway, so what she did was, she got a hold of these OSS documents. That was the precursor of the CIA. And these documents outlined how the Nazis actually had a plan to destroy Christianity. So, yes, this is what despotic movements do, because they understand that if people believe in God, if he is their highest power, if his laws are preeminent in people's hearts and minds, then the government will not be their highest power, and its laws will not be preeminent in their hearts and minds, and they don't want that competition.
That document, I actually have a copy of it, was an annex to the OSS investigation into how Nazism came to power in an ostensibly Christian country. And the conclusion was the Nazis were successful in depriving the church of operating beyond its four walls. Again, very quick paraphrase. So, we as the church have to operate beyond the four walls, and that is the solution to an old enemy, an old strategy, but the same conclusion, and that is truth, actually wins out. When we come back from the break, more with Selwyn Duke, a writer for The New American, selwynduke.com.
What if I told you could convert your 401k or your IRA into gold? While your retirement is being beat up by a volatile stock market and inflation, it could instead be resting safely in physical gold at a place of your own choosing, including your own business. Look, gold has increased 50% in just the last year. Stock market, it's been nothing but a roller coaster. So protect your retirement from market chaos by calling Verity Metals today.
We're back with our guest, Selwyn Duke, selwynduke.com. We're going to shift gears and talk about Zoran Mamdani. And yeah, I'm sure it's pronounced ethnically a little bit different than that. That's all right. But Trump today said, we don't need communists in this country, referring directly to Mamdani after he won the primary for the Democrats in New York, the New York mayoral race. So, and I know you've been watching this and watching it carefully. There's a quote I want to give to you. We've talked quite a bit on this show about the red-green axis, and I want to give you a quote from Carlos the Jackal, if we could put that up right now. Carlos the Jackal very clearly understood that it had to be an alliance between communists and jihadis that would take down the United States. Do we have that ready? Okay, so we'll get that up here in a second. That alliance is really coming together in fruition in one man, and that is Zoran Mamdani. What is your analysis of this whole situation that's going on and unfolding in New York?
Yeah, well, I agree that he's a very dangerous individual. I mean, this is a man who just seems to be a flat-out Marxist. I don't know if you saw this video. I saw this yesterday, and I did a little research. It appears to be authentic. He was talking, I guess, some years ago, and he actually said that one of their goals was, quote, the seizure of the means of production, unquote. That's what he said. Now, that is flat out Marxist doctrine. If that's what he believes, this man is absolutely toxic. And let me tell you something else that's very dangerous about him. I just wrote about this. I really hadn't watched these fellows on TV until recently, but after the result was in of the Democratic primary, I did. And I saw Mamdani on TV and I said, now I know why he prevailed. This man could charm chicken off the bone. And too many pundits, commentators, don't understand how important charisma is in politics. Charisma is king. You know, as researchers have said, in political races, it's usually the case that the most charismatic candidate wins. And I don't like this fellow Mamdani, but I will be the first to say he has so much charisma, it's unbelievable. He speaks well. He's a great snake oil salesman. That's why he is where he is, and that makes him all the more dangerous. And his agenda, like I said, is just absolutely devastating. He's talked about defunding the police. He's talked about a $30 minimum wage. He's talked about city-owned grocery stores. Well, we tried that in the Soviet Union, didn't we? I think we had bread lines there. It didn't work out too well. He's talked about freezing rent. We've tried that before, too. We had rent control in New York City in the 60s and 70s, I believe it was. It resulted in less housing, burned out buildings. I saw them with my own eyes. I grew up in the Bronx. This man is toxic, but he just may win the general.
It's incredible, isn't it? You know, we talk about communism, we talk about jihadis, and I think now the discussion needs to shift. Naturalization applications, so to become a citizen of the United States, you answer a series of questions. I know this because I've seen the application, and I've seen great people that have applied for citizenship in the United States, and they have to answer questions like, have you ever been part of a communist movement or a movement to overthrow the United States of America? Jihadis believe that the reliance of the traveler and how it defines jihad is real. They believe that jihad is warfare against Christians and non-Muslims, and that Sharia law is the only law. So therefore, they cannot be American. They cannot say, raise their right hand and say, I'm going to uphold the Constitution of the United States, because Sharia has to overrule the Constitution of the United States. Communists also avowed, they pledged to overthrow the United States of America and the Constitution of the United States. So if somebody fills out a naturalization application and lies about it, which I suspect they're already investigating regarding Zohran Mamdani, then that is grounds for denaturalization and denaturalization proceeding. Do we actually think, though, I mean, in this discussion we're having right now, Selwyn Duke, that we're going to get to some accountability? And do you think it's right to do that, or do you think it might be a slippery slope?
I think it would be right to do. Whether or not it's politically wise at this juncture, I don't know, because of what you just mentioned. You know, you have to remember, the problem is that a good percentage of our country is demoralized. And I mean that their morals have been undermined to a point where they can't discern the difference between good and evil. So you have people in the media, of course, mainstream media, academia, entertainment, a lot of people in the rank and file and the electorate, who, quite frankly, would see that as some kind of despotic move. I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it. I'm just saying that you've got to be very careful when you contemplate these things. I would love to see accountability. I mean, you take Mamdani. He became a citizen just 7 years ago. So I have to tell you something. If I had my druthers, and it's not going to happen, I would have a natural born requirement, maybe for all public offices in the United States. I don't like this idea that someone can come here like Ilhan Omar from a foreign country, right, then gain public office and then use it to rail against our nation. It's disgusting.
She just posted the flag of Somalia celebrating Somali independence, clearly done intentionally during the week of Independence Day in the United States. I mean, clearly, why are we countenancing this?
Because, again, there are too many of us who are demoralized. You see, if we were more patriotic as a people, and of course there are patriots among us, when we witnessed something like that, we would absolutely be enraged. We would overflow with righteous anger, and there would be a public upheaval where that just could not be tolerated. Unfortunately, that's not the case, because too many people just are very, very, you might say, lukewarm. You know, G.K. Chesterton said, tolerance is the virtue of the man without convictions. And that's the problem. Too many of us just don't have convictions. And by the way, I've mentioned tolerance a few times. Like I said before, tolerance implies the abiding of a perceived negative, okay? You never would have to tolerate something that's nice, like a delectable meal or a beautiful new car. You relish those things. If you're saying you're being tolerant, that implies it's something difficult to deal with, like a bad cold or terrible, terrible weather, okay? But if that perceived objective or perceived negative is also an objective negative, something that really is bad, you shouldn't be tolerating it. You should wipe it out if you can, okay? An example would be if you have a disease that can't be remedied, then yeah, you've got to tolerate its symptoms. But if you can cure that disease, you don't do that, you cure it. It's the same thing in the social realm. If you have something that is remediable, you take care of it. You don't tolerate it. So we've got to really change our conception of that word tolerance.
I agree. And the Constitution in that vein is not a suicide pact. Here's the quote from Carlos the Jackal, quote, only a coalition of Marxists and Islamists can destroy the United States, end quote. This, you know, the red-green axis, the Constitution is not a suicide pact. It can't be. And yet I think that that's what some people are saying right now. If we don't start enforcing these things, and I really, the only argument I hear on the other side of not enforcing these things is typically political. We don't want to go back to McCarthyism, but the fact is Joe McCarthy was right on a lot of things. Should we not revisit this and say, hey, you know, if you're coming into the United States, but you don't actually want to uphold the Constitution, you want to overthrow it, we just don't want you here. Find a different country. I mean, isn't that a fair statement? I mean, isn't that a statement that we could all agree on? But it seems like the answer to that right now is no.
No, I actually agree with you. I mean, harking back to what I said before, when I said the politics of it, I was just talking about how you could maybe lose re-election, and then, of course, you're going to have left-wing tyranny foisted upon you. I was talking about that. But yes, I mean, definitely we should do something about these individuals if we can. And by the way, immigration is just out of control. If I had my way, I would have halted immigration a long time ago wholesale, because quite frankly, we have to get our own house in order. We have been balkanized. We're pressing 1 for English. If it keeps up one day, we'll be pressing 2 for English. This is not good. This is not good. You have to have demographic stability in your nation because demography is destiny. But yes, these particular individuals, they obviously have not come here in good faith. I mean, if Mamdani is talking the way he is, and we mentioned Ilhan Omar, then they've signaled very, very clearly that they're enemies of the country. I just wish more people recognized that and cared about it. If they did, then we wouldn't have to be here talking about it right now because it would no longer be an issue.
I mean, UAE, Bahrain, Syria, even Egypt, Saudi Arabia, they've all banned the Muslim Brotherhood, declared it a terrorist organization. We can't seem to do that here in the United States.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely crazy, and hopefully Trump will get on top of that. I mean, by the way, you mentioned these Arab countries. They also don't take their co-religionists who were so-called refugees. You might remember during that refugee crisis 10 years ago in 2015, you had these waves of Muslim migrants who were bypassing these Arab countries and going into the heart of what used to be Christendom, Europe, and you have to say, well, hey, why aren't they going to Saudi Arabia and these other rich Arab countries that are relatively sparsely populated? But these particular Arab countries don't want their co-religionists. I think that really speaks volumes, doesn't it?
It really does speak volumes. And I think we just need to keep raising the alarm, keep bringing up the truth and the facts. And I know people are listening because after one of our episodes that we did together, I saw a few phrases from what you said out of the episode appear nationally. So I think we are having an effect on the national debate. So really appreciate everything you're doing in your article, Selwyn Duke. I think it is changing America for the better. Blessings to you and keep up the fight.
Same here. Thank you for having me and God bless.
Selwyn Duke, selwynduke.com. The last bit of this, what can you do? I'm going to ask you to do something. It should be pretty easy. Patriot Radio is now going to be on Patriot TV 4 to 5 o'clock Eastern Standard Time, Monday through Friday, across also the American Christian Network on terrestrial radio from 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So please share that with your friends and family. And on the American Christian Network, it's on KTW. And we are just so overjoyed. And thank you so much for following us and for supporting us. A huge door has opened that we can bring Patriot Radio to Patriot TV nationally. And that is due in large part to all of you out there, all your words of encouragement, your sharing, and your liking. So take a moment right now, share and like this post, comment on it, and help us change the narrative, one of truth, and to expose evil and bring the story behind the story now to the entire United States and not just the inland Northwest. I want to thank all of you for joining me today on Patriot Radio and Patriot.tv. Please go to Patriot.tv, by the way, if you've never heard of it, because it's going to be all of us standing in this time that is going to bring the awakening to the entire world. And the United States is still a beacon on the hill. This is still the greatest generation, but only truly if we keep up the fight.